Hi, I'm Luke Evans, and I'm a photographer and artist. I live here in London, but I was originally from the very rural counties of Herefordshire. So thinking back to when I was younger and the very early days of my career, I didn't really have the knowledge to say that being a photographer was an actual job that you could do. The only experience I had of that was through, fashion magazines at the time, being excited by that work. And so it was really a case of me exploring what was it that excited me when I was younger. I was a performer, I was a dancer, and so I knew I had this want to sort of express myself to some degree. In tandem with that, at the same time, I was very academic. So I was doing physics and maths, and that's felt to me at the time and to my family, which I have a very working class upbringing. My dad's a builder, mum's a nurse, and so I think that brought them some degree of security that they had this academic kid that was going to do something. So it came as a real shock to them when I reached the end of high school and college and had to really think about what it was that I wanted to put my time, effort and energy into. So it came to going throughout college. I was doing all my maths and physics, and right at the very end when I decided let's start thinking about university, the next step, it suddenly dawned on me that I didn't want to do physics and maths, and I had this much more emotional, urgent thing to nurture that was my performative side, dance, drawing at the time. And so I decided to do a foundation degree, which gave me the sort of freedom to be able to explore these things. It came as a real shock to my parents, but they were really supportive at the time, and that was crucial to me to feel like I had the freedom to go and explore these things. They had this trust that I would be able to listen to myself, know that what it was that I wanted to do, and hopefully things would then come from that. So I'd now made the decision to go and nurture my creative side. The first step of that was the foundation degree. That was in rural England and Wales, but there was me there, this queer kid there, and I was doing installation work, I was doing drawing, I was doing painting, photography, video stuff at the time, and that was a little sort of petri dish first year. When I left that course, I still didn't know what it was that I actually wanted to do. I just know that I had ideas, and I wanted them to have some kind of performance aspect to them, and I liked that expression, that self-expression. So I started looking at university courses, and that's when I found Kingston. Now, Kingston at the time had this graphic design and photography course, which no longer exists, but I think it exists in spirit. And I remember going down for an interview there, portfolio in hand, and I remember seeing all these people there. I remember being struck by them with the thoughts that they had, the conviction they had behind their ideas. And I remember feeling like I just had to be with those people. And I think that's what's really it's a really important decision to make when you're younger. It's not just so much about what's the course title or the place. It's about what are the kinds of people that you want to be with. And I felt this real drive in that space. So I applied and I got in. And the following 3 years were some of the highest and lowest points of my life. It was very, very competitive. It really brought the best and the worst out of people. But for me, it really gave me a platform to explore my ideas and figure out what it was that I had that other people didn't. And I knew that I had this interesting mix of a slightly performative side and these very diverse mix of mediums of what I was using. One of the earliest projects that really forced me into my career was a project that I did where I wanted to make this strange self-portrait. So I decided for this project that I would eat 35mm film, let it go through me, and see what comes of that. So I ate this film, and every time I wanted to go to the bathroom, I had to go in a bag and fill through, but I finally got this piece of film. And what was nice about being at Kingston at the time was that they had the science department next to the arts department. So I went to them and said, look, I have this piece of film. Can I make some big prints of it? And between us, we decided to use a scanning electron microscope to enlarge this piece of film. to this massive size, and I made these prints. So I put these prints on the wall, and it was a very, very quick process. It was like a week from idea to finish. And whilst this was happening, the thing that was in the back of my head this whole time was something that my first teacher at university told me, Zelda Malone. And she said, it don't matter what it is that you do, just wow me. Just wow me with what you're going to make. And I think that's such a simple thing to think about, but it makes you simplify everything. It makes you realise that the work you make has potential and power, and you just need to think about that. So I put these on the wall. What happened was someone came past as I was putting these on the wall with my friend who I made this project with, and she just offhand remarked, oh, you should probably send these into creative review, get these out of these 4 walls of university. So I did. I took pictures of them, sent them in, and the next day they were on the front page of creative review, which at the time was a massive deal for me, and it suddenly felt very exposed. But what followed really set me up for my career. The following day after that, I had Channel 4 calling me up saying that they wanted to film myself and my friend Josh for News at 6. We were going to be an and finally at the end of the news. But you have all this depressing news and then and finally something interesting. So we were on Channel 4, and then that very early on, I think I was 21 at the time, made me realise the power of showing your work. So over the next 2 years, at uni, I just kept on exploring different ideas, and so I left with a whole range of stuff. I left with photography, video, installation stuff, still like a whole hodgepodge of things, but they all had this common thread of having an idea behind them. So you get to the end of uni, the bubble has sort of burst, and you're thrown out into the world. Suddenly you have to make money. I didn't have a safety net of, I couldn't, had to get a job. I couldn't just continue to make weird and wonderful ideas and hope that I make money from them at some point. I thought that I might go into advertising. I thought maybe a creative. So I briefly dipped my toes into that world, and quickly realised that I was being told that I would be the person that they would come to execute an idea. So that was right at the end of uni, just as I left. I'd basically been rejected from my only route into staying into London, and knew that I had to go and do something else. So after London, I decided that my only option that I had was to go back and live with my mum. Moved in with my mum, and I knew at the time that I had this string of successful work that I wanted to just continue and hope that something might come from this. So I worked in a gift shop for like 3 years. It was very much by day working in the gift shop, and by night I was in the studio. It was that, unfortunately. And slowly but surely over time, it took many, many years for me to engage with work in a meaningful way, to start to realise that the camera is a tool that I wanted to explore. But whilst I was doing this, suddenly, about 3 years after doing this, a friend of mine who worked at a design agency, who was on the course that I was on, rang me up and said, we're working with this brand, we would love to see what you would do for them. And at the time, I remember being both excited by that and terrified by that at the same time. Because if you can imagine from what I've been explaining, a lot of the work that I made was for gallery walls. It was very much sort of put it on there and then disappear, and it was very serious, and that was the success that I had had. Oh, as an aside, as I left university, the Saatchi Gallery bought all of my work. So I left and was in the countryside, knowing that I had this little wind behind me of maybe my work is going to go into a gallery. So suddenly feeling like I had to engage that part of my brain for like money, like directly for money, and with and for other people, was this, it felt very tense at the time. But I did it, and very quickly realised that I like earning money. And that sort of planted the seed that I might be someone for hire. So I very slowly then started to make more and more work that might have a slight more commercial appeal to it. And I wish I could sit here and say that I had this huge job that came in and changed my life, and that's what set everything. But the reality is that it was a slog. It was a slow burn of making work, of second guessing myself, thinking, is this actually going to go anywhere? And that is the reality of it. And slowly and surely, I built up a client base, I built up trust, I had slightly made peace with engaging my creative brain for money, and slowly slipping away from the art world and the gallery world. So about 7 years ago, I'd built up just about enough regular clients that I could step away from my day job at the gift shop. I did that for about 6 months, still working at a distance. I had a little studio on a little farm that a friend of a friend had, and I'd work remotely with clients and an agency that I was working with at the time. Suddenly, then, though after about 6 months, I found out that I had testicular cancer. So that, for anyone that may be watching this that has experienced this themselves or with people, you never expect these things to sort of to come your way. And that put a sort of short, sharp sort of stop on that for a while for me, and I had to suddenly go inwards. And thinking back to it now, at the time, a lot of what I was doing creatively suddenly didn't mean anything to me. I was like, why am I losing sleep over how this glass of water looks, or how this watch looks? I don't know. When, I was looking at potentially dying. And I won't linger too much here, but after about a year of surgery, recovery, and slowly but surely getting back into it, I then resumed where I left off. And I had the support of an agent behind me who I'd been working with over the time and built up a relationship with. I had the clients that were really understanding and came back to me after that period of time. And so then started to get back on the treadmill of working regularly. And it reached a point where I was working so regularly and coming to London so frequently that being 3 hours, 4 hours outside of London was such a slog. So it was such a lot of work that for one reason or another, I had a partner at the time who was living in London, work was really busy. I found a way of moving to London and slowly but surely putting the pieces in place where I could see myself, and therefore other people could see me, as a still life photographer, still a little bit as an artist, and I was stepping away from that slightly, but I could see myself as a photographer. I was working regularly, I was building a portfolio of work that therefore got more work, and that carried on, and the jobs got slowly bigger and bigger and bigger. And for someone that, if you've been listening, I never assisted any photographers. I had been working from my room and then this little barn studio, and so I had to learn a lot of this on the spot. And going to these bigger jobs, going to London, turning up on set, knowing who's doing what, knowing what this is doing, knowing what that's doing, understanding the kit. For someone like me that was so used to working by themselves, that was terrifying. And so I spent a lot of time on product manuals when I was in Wales, figuring out what I might come across in the studio. But I had amazing support team around me, had an incredible assistants that were very understanding, and I realised that really you just have to bring your energy, your idea, and your taste. You have to have trust in your taste about what looks good, because if you have talented people around you that can facilitate, that can show you how to use a piece of lighting, what might make it slightly better, as long as you come with your taste, that is what people find valuable. And that was true very early on in my career, and is still true right now, if not more true right now. So then I think maybe during COVID, that was oddly enough for me, like my biggest year. I had this very big job that came for Tiffany, that came through relationships that I'd worked with a design agency with. They were working on their rebranding, and that was a huge deal for me at the time. And I remember turning up on set, and my entire team completely was removed because of exposure to COVID. So here I am rattling around, nervous me, rattling around in this huge studio for this massive client with no photo team. But because of that, I found some of the closest people that I work with now who came in and jumped on that job pretty quickly. Then just over time, just the jobs kept just coming in, and I think, as many of you watching this might sort of feel this, is you kind of go on a bit of a cruise when you say yes to a job, yes to a job. The overlap between one job to the next is sort of constantly like this, and so you don't really have the space and time to figure out how are you going to steer this ship into something. And again, growing up with no money at all, I always had the urge to say yes to absolutely everything. And then I think about 2 years ago, after building up a sort of body of work, I sort of sat and thought, what is the future of this? Like, where am I going with this? What do I want to be doing? And so I then, in my spare time, just decided to dip my toe into other different styles of photography, doing more experiments. And so now where I am today is I'm seeing this big change in the industry, and I'm looking at the next sort of step of my career. What is that going to look like? So about 2 years ago, I'd reached a point where I felt quite unsatisfied, to tell you the truth, about the images that I was making. And so I had to take a step back and just try and understand why. What was it about the images that I wasn't enjoying? At the time, I was shooting a lot purely digitally, and as someone that loves process and likes getting stuck in and using their hands, the thought sort of materialised in my head that maybe I should think about using film. And in hindsight, it's probably something that I should have done whilst I was at uni and had the freedom to explore. But I remember I bought a Pentax 6.7 medium format, went straight into this, and I just loved the process of making images with a camera that I couldn't see what they were looking like. It also meant that I could go into the darkroom and start playing with things there. And it wasn't just the aesthetics, the degree of softness, the slight abstraction that I could get, it was more the process. I just really enjoyed making images in this way. And that was so valuable at that time when I felt a bit jaded, a bit unsatisfied, working a lot commercially, always on digital, fast. And then suddenly being able to feel like everything felt a bit more painterly, a bit less precise. And I loved that. So now I find that I'm in a position where I can bring in the digital side when I need it. And I actually love working digitally on set because it feels much more collaborative. You know, I like working with the art director and discussing ideas. And my assistants, I love being on set. If you've been on set with me, I love asking what people think of something. And digital allows that. Whereas on film, there's a much more about the trust between the relationships you have, and that they trust me to have the trust in my own abilities that something's gonna look good. So looking forwards into where I see this potentially going, and what is the value of actually what I do as a photographer and what do I enjoy as a photographer, where is that gonna go? And that's what I'm thinking about on the spot basically right now. The elephant in the room, of course, is AI. So personally, the way that I've experienced it over the relatively short period of time is I'm using it in treatments sometimes because I think it can be particularly valuable in convincing someone of your idea. You have to imagine some people don't have the ability, if you say, imagine a red tomato in your head, they can't imagine what a red tomato looks like. They need to be shown it. So for that purpose, for me, it can be so useful in selling an idea. I've also found that sometimes that can set you up for failure because it's so convincing that it may be slightly unachievable on set in real life, in which case you may be better off using sketches or something that leaves things up to imagination. So from a practical point of view, that's about what I use it for. Also use it for just text-based stuff, organising my life, things like that. But right now, thinking about what does that mean for me as someone that makes still life, mainly still images in the future. And everyone is working this out on the spot, myself included. You can make predictions about what will happen. Will teams shrink? Will certain kinds of work get lost immediately? How does that make me feel? What should I be doing? I think the only thing that I can be doing right now is taking a step back and thinking, what do I do that is valuable as a human being that makes work for other human beings knowing that AI is working alongside. And I came to a realization maybe about 6 months ago, which is this thread that's been throughout all of my work, which is the process and the fact that I'm a bit of a performer, and realizing that that is what is lacking from this very, very efficient process. Not to say that I'm against AI at all. I think industries need this sort of swelling and compressing every now and then. But it's given me an opportunity to really explore that side of me. So maybe about 6 months ago, I started to look into how can I be more present in communicating my work. So when you think about communicating your work, I think there's lots of different categories that people put their work into. So when you think about showing work online, it might be through thinking about how you'd present in a gallery, which is you put it on a wall and you disappear and you let it sit there and that's what it does. So I think people have brought that way of communicating work online. Whilst that's been happening, a whole other cohort of people have come along and they themselves are just as much a part of the process about communicating work. So that has been on my mind a lot recently. And I've been exploring ways of how to communicate my own work and the process around it into selling the work. And I found it sounds so gross saying, relative success. And relationships have built from that. So I personally, the only thing I think I can say that's valuable in this conversation is that as a creative myself, finding ways to communicate an interesting process, a story, a way of making work has resonated with people and therefore, I hope, is going to be more and more valuable in the future. For anyone young watching this and wanting some advice, there's a few things I'd say. Firstly, almost forget about the work to some degree and think about building a life that facilitates the space for you to make work. For me, years ago, that was working in a gift shop and then on the weekend making work. Don't feel the pressure to suddenly live every aspect of your life as what your career is. Try and find a way to make space for work. The next thing is you really do have to enjoy what you make because people pick up on it, especially now when people can tell if you're being inauthentic. It's not like working on a, Excel document or something where you can muscle through this work. You have to enjoy what you're making or else it'll be very, very short-lived and you'll have little bursts. For me, I sometimes think of my career and life as like this river. I'm on it and each sort of stroke is a piece of work I've made or some decision I've made that propels you forwards. And sometimes that boat's going to go really, really quickly. Other times it can be very still and you have to find ways of paddling you through those stagnant bits. And if you enjoy what you make, that's going to make that whole process so much easier. It's easier said than done. The next thing I think is just being patient. I think especially now we're looking for quick fixes, things to just pull off and apply now. This is a long game. You build a body of work over a certain period of time, that builds authority. Sometimes you might have a piece of work that goes crazy and lots of people see it. That also builds authority. You need those two things. You need to give yourself the time and space to actually make work. And the last thing is and this sounds cliche, but you have to get comfortable with being afraid and getting comfortable with fear. That might be fear of rejection of putting your work out. It might be fear of success and what that might mean for your life. Do you have to suddenly uproot and move to London or move to a city? Or what's that? The fear of that, the fear of things going well. It's exactly those feelings that are going to push you forwards. So getting comfortable with fear, being patient, nurturing your own life to allow the work to exist, and just enjoy it.